The Inner Game of Tennis by W. Timothy Gallwey. Picture yourself playing the best game of your life. Every shot flows like water. Every swing feels like silk. Your opponent, who usually gives you a serious workout, can barely keep pace. You're not even thinking about technique anymore. You're just playing. You've slipped into that elusive state athletes dream about, the zone. Then, during a break, your opponent approaches the net with genuine admiration in their eyes. Wow, what's different today? Your forehand is on fire. You pause, a bit flattered, and your brain kicks into gear. Well, I guess I'm catching the ball further out front, keeping my wrist locked, really extending on the follow-through. You return to the baseline to serve. Suddenly, your arm feels wooden. The racket seems twice as heavy. You're thinking, right, meet it out front. Lock that wrist. You toss the ball up and slam it straight into the net. The magic evaporates. The zone disappears like smoke. Your graceful flow has transformed into awkward, self-conscious struggle. The rest of the match feels like wading through mud. What on earth just happened? This simple question unlocks one of the most mind-bending books ever written, not just about sports, but about human performance itself. We're talking about The Inner Game of Tennis by W. Timothy Gallwey. Originally published way back in 1974, it's become a quiet powerhouse, a secret playbook for championship coaches like Pete Carroll with the Seattle Seahawks and Steve Kerr with the Golden State Warriors. It's sold millions of copies, not because it teaches you a killer backhand, but because it exposes a fundamental truth about why we succeed and why we stumble. Gallwey, a modest tennis coach, stumbled onto a discovery so powerful it would flip everything we thought we knew about learning and coaching. He realized that the opponent across the net isn't our main problem. The real opponent, the one who makes us choke under pressure, doubt ourselves, and sabotage our own performance, lives right inside our own skull. What if the secret to getting better at anything isn't trying harder? What if all those instructions you're constantly feeding yourself are actually the chains holding you back? By the time we're done here, you'll understand the single greatest roadblock to your own performance. You'll meet two hidden personalities locked in constant battle inside your mind, and you'll discover the surprisingly simple arts of silencing your inner critic, trusting your gut, and releasing the potential that's been there all along. This isn't just about tennis. This is about the inner game of everything. Every single one of us, whether we're on a tennis court, sweating through an exam, or standing up to give a presentation, has heard that voice in our head. It's the voice that barks, "Come on, pull it together," after we mess up, or whispers, "Don't blow this," right when the stakes are highest. We've all felt that maddening frustration, that bizarre disconnect between knowing exactly what to do and being completely unable to execute. As Timothy Gallwey captures it, the most common complaint across all sports is this: it's not that I don't know what to do, it's that I don't do what I know. This is where the inner game journey begins. Gallwey, working as a young tennis pro, was doing what every coach does: dishing out instructions. Transfer your weight. Keep your racket face square. Extend through the ball. He was teaching the outer game, the physical mechanics of striking a tennis ball. But something strange kept happening. The more instructions he offered, the more his students seemed to lock up. The harder they tried to get it right, the worse their tennis became. He shares the story of a student named Dorothy. He'd give her a simple, gentle tip, something like, "Dorothy, try lifting your follow-through up to your shoulder." And sure enough, Dorothy would give it her best shot. Her face would scrunch up, her jaw would clench, her muscles would tighten like steel cables, and the swing, instead of becoming smooth, would become even more jerky and awkward. His coaching was solid, but something was getting scrambled in the translation. Something inside Dorothy's mind was sabotaging her body's ability to perform a simple movement. This led Gallwey to a breakthrough realization. He asked himself, when a player is on the court talking to themselves, who exactly is talking to whom? When you say, "I'm talking to myself," who is the I and who is the myself? He discovered that within every player there are two distinct personalities. He named them, quite simply, Self 1 and Self 2. Self 1 is the teller. It's your conscious mind, your ego. It's that voice in your head issuing instructions, passing judgments, and obsessing over the score. It's the part of you that devours technique books and tries to juggle 5 different mechanical thoughts during a single swing. Self 1 believes it's the coach. It thinks it runs the show. Self 2 is the doer. It's your body, your unconscious mind, your natural instinctive self. Self 2 is an absolute marvel. It's the part of you that figured out walking without a single verbal cue. It's the part that catches a ball flying at you without consciously calculating trajectory, velocity, and spin. Self 2 doesn't respond to commands like, "Keep your wrist firm." It speaks the language of feelings and images. It learns by doing and watching. And here's the central problem of the inner game. The relationship between Self 1 and Self 2 is usually a disaster. Self 1 doesn't trust Self 2. It acts like a nagging helicopter parent, constantly shouting orders and nitpicking every tiny mistake. It hollers at Self 2 to keep it firm, keep it firm, keep it firm, as if Self 2 is either deaf or incompetent. But Self 2 isn't incompetent at all. It's actually a genius. It's your body's built-in intelligence. The endless chatter and criticism from Self 1 creates tension, doubt, and what Gallwey calls interference. It makes you try too hard, which really just means Self 1 is attempting to micromanage the muscles, causing them to tighten and fight each other. The result? Clumsy, awkward performance. And then, after the ball smacks into the net, who does Self 1 blame? Self 2, naturally. It says, "You clumsy fool, you'll never get this right." This relentless criticism chips away at our confidence and creates a vicious spiral of trying, failing, and judging. So how do we repair this toxic relationship? How do we quiet the nagging voice of Self 1 and unleash the silent brilliance of Self 2? This is where the practical magic of the inner game begins. It's not about mastering a new technique. It's about unlearning the mental habits that block our natural ability. And the very first skill, the foundation of everything else, is learning to let go of judgment. Imagine a tennis player dumps a backhand into the net. At its core, this is just an event. A ball struck a net. But Self 1 doesn't see it as just an event. It immediately slaps a label on it. That was a terrible backhand. That single judgment is the seed that sprouts into a jungle of interference. The thought, "that was bad," leads to, "what did I screw up?" Which leads to, "okay, next time I need to remember to do this and avoid that." Suddenly, the mind is cluttered like a messy desk, the body is wound tight, and the player isn't focused on the game anymore. They're trapped in a war inside their own head. Letting go of judgment doesn't mean ignoring your mistakes. It means seeing them as they actually are, stripped of emotional baggage. It's the difference between saying, "The ball landed 2 feet long," which is a clean observation, and saying, "That was an awful shot," which is a judgment. The observation feeds you useful information. The judgment feeds you anxiety. Gallwey shares a beautiful story to demonstrate this, the story of Jack. Jack was a businessman who was absolutely convinced he had a horrible backhand, because, as 5 different pros had told him, he took his racket back way too high. Gallwey watched him take a few swings, and yep, sure enough, his racket lifted up just before swinging forward. But instead of becoming the sixth instructor to tell him keep it low, Gallwey tried something different. He simply asked Jack to swing again, but this time, to watch his own reflection in a large window. Jack swung, and as he caught sight of his reflection, his eyes went wide with genuine surprise. He said, "Whoa, I really do take my racket back high." There was no judgment in his tone, just pure, fascinated observation. What was remarkable was Jack's surprise. He'd been told this fact 5 times before, but he'd never truly seen it himself. His mind had been too busy judging his terrible stroke to actually observe it clearly. Now, freed from judgment and simply observing his swing in the mirror, he swung again. This time, effortlessly, his racket stayed low. It corrected itself. He hadn't forced the change. He'd simply become aware of what was actually happening, and in that clear, quiet awareness, the natural learning process of self too took the wheel. This is the transformative power of non-judgmental awareness. It acts like a quiet mirror. It doesn't add spin or subtract truth. It just shows you what is. And when the mind settles down, self too can finally work its magic. Gallwey compares this process to how we nurture a growing plant. When we plant a rose seed, we don't criticize it for being rootless and stemless. When the first bud emerges, we don't condemn it for not being a full-blown flower yet. We simply stand back and wonder at the process, giving the plant what it needs at each stage. Our skills work the same way. Every mistake is just part of the growth journey. Once we learn to quiet the judgment of self-one, the next step is to actively learn to trust self-two. Think for a moment about what your body, your self-two, accomplishes without any conscious input. Right now, as you're listening to my voice, your heart is pumping blood, your lungs are exchanging oxygen, and billions of cells are working in perfect coordination. To return a tennis serve, your brain performs calculations more complex than any supercomputer, all in under a second. This is the incredible instrument we so casually label clumsy or uncoordinated. Self-two deserves our deep respect. Trusting self-two on the court means allowing your body to hit the ball. The key word here is allow. You're not forcing it to happen. You're letting it happen. You trust in the competence of your body and its deep reservoir of wisdom, and you simply get self-one out of the way. But how does self-two learn in the first place, if not from verbal instructions? It learns primarily through images. Gallwey contrasts how he was taught to dance as a kid, with rigid step-by-step verbal commands, to how a modern kid learns. A kid goes to a party, watches other people dance, absorbs a visual impression of the movements, and a few minutes later is on the floor moving. They don't think, okay, lift the left shoulder while rotating the right foot. They just feel it and mimic what they saw. To self-two, a picture really is worth 1,000 words. This leads to one of the most practical techniques in the book for communicating with self-two. Instead of lecturing yourself about mechanics, you program self-two with a crystal clear image of the result you want. Let's say you want to hit the ball deep into your opponent's court. Instead of loading yourself up with a dozen mechanical reminders, you simply take a moment to vividly imagine the ball's path. Picture its elegant arc, floating a few feet over the net and landing just inside the baseline. Hold that image clearly in your mind. Then you simply ask self-two, do that, and you let it happen. You don't force it. You trust your body to make the necessary adjustments to create the image you've planted, and surprisingly often, it does, with a grace and efficiency that will amaze you. You can apply the same approach to form. If you want to adjust an element of your swing, say keeping your racket face flat on the follow-through, the process is identical. First, create a vivid image. Hold your racket in the correct follow-through position and simply look at it for a few seconds. Then close your eyes and imagine your complete swing with that perfect follow-through. Finally, swing a few times, just experiencing what this new motion feels like. You've now programmed Self 2 with both a visual and a kinesthetic image. Now when you play, you don't force it, you just let it happen, and you calmly observe what unfolds. These skills, releasing judgment and trusting Self 2 with clear images, are incredibly powerful, but they all hinge on a master skill, the one that makes everything else possible, the art of relaxed concentration. To silence Self 1, you can't just command it to be quiet. That's like trying not to think of a pink elephant. The more you wrestle with the mind, the louder it roars. The secret is to give the mind a job, something to focus on that anchors it firmly in the present moment. In tennis, the most obvious focal point is the ball itself. But Gallwey suggests we need to go deeper than just watch the ball. He recommends focusing on something more subtle, something that demands your complete attention. He tells his students to focus on the seams of the tennis ball as it spins through the air. When you try to see those seams, your mind becomes so absorbed in this delicate task that it doesn't have the bandwidth left over to worry, judge, or instruct. It's almost a trick. You're giving Self 1 a job to do, and while it's occupied, Self 2 is free to play the game without interference. Focusing on the seams also naturally anchors your mind in the present moment, because those seams are always happening right now. Another brilliantly simple technique for maintaining focus is what Gallwey calls bounce hit. The instruction is elegantly simple. As you rally, say the word bounce out loud at the precise instant the ball hits the court, and say hit at the exact moment it makes contact with either your racket or your opponent's. Bounce, hit, bounce, hit. This simple rhythm accomplishes two things. First, it forces your eyes and mind to track the ball at the most crucial moments. Second, the act of saying the words occupies your verbal mind, Self 1, and prevents it from streaming its usual unhelpful commentary. It's like active meditation that keeps you rooted in the sights and sounds of right now. And it's not limited to sight. You can focus on sound too. Listen to that distinctive crack when a ball connects perfectly with the sweet spot. That sound carries information. It's the signature of a solid shot. Instead of trying to memorize the mechanics of that shot, you can simply hold the sound in your memory and ask Self 2 to recreate it. Your body's internal computer often knows exactly what adjustments to make. You can also tune into feeling. What does the racket grip feel like in your palm? What's the rhythm of your swing? Where is your body weight distributed? By bringing awareness to these physical sensations, you're anchoring your mind in the here and now, feeding Self 2 the rich, sensory information it needs to learn and perform. And what about those critical moments between points, when the mind is most likely to drift into worry or regret? Gallwey's advice is profound in its simplicity. Focus on your breathing. Your breath is always with you. It's always happening in the present. By gently bringing your attention to the natural rhythm of your breath, flowing in and out, you calm the mind, release anxiety about what's coming, and return to the court centered and ready for the next point. When all these inner skills align, when judgment falls silent, when trust is given freely, and when the mind rests calmly focused in the present, something extraordinary happens. We slip into a state of peak performance, what athletes call the zone. In this state, there's no trying, there's no thinking. The body seems to move by itself, with a wisdom and grace that feels almost otherworldly. This, Gallwey says, is the experience of Self 2 playing the game, free from the interference of Self 1. This brings us to the final and perhaps most profound question. If the inner game is about conquering our inner obstacles, what does that mean for competition? What does winning actually mean? Our culture often teaches us that winning is about proving we're superior to someone else. Our self-worth gets tangled up with the final score. This is a self-won game, and it's the source of most of our pressure and anxiety. Gallwey offers a radical redefinition of winning. He uses the elegant analogy of a surfer and a wave. Why does a surfer seek out the biggest, most challenging wave they can handle? They're not trying to defeat the ocean. They seek the challenge because the obstacle, the sheer power and size of the wave, is precisely what will draw out their greatest skill, their deepest focus, their fullest potential. The obstacle isn't an enemy. It's an invitation. In tennis, your opponent is your wave. Your opponent isn't your enemy. They're your partner in a mutual endeavor. Their job is to present you with the toughest obstacles possible, and your job is to do the same for them. Why? Because it's only through facing these challenges that you both have the opportunity to discover just how good you can really be. Seen this way, true competition becomes a form of cooperation. Nobody is defeated, because both players emerge stronger from the contest. Winning, then, isn't about crushing someone else. Winning is overcoming obstacles to reach a goal, and the value of winning is only as meaningful as the goal itself. In the outer game, the goal is a trophy. In the inner game, the goal is to overcome your own mental barriers, your wandering concentration, your nagging self-doubt, your simmering frustration, to discover and express your true potential. When you care more about giving your best effort than about the final score, you liberate yourself from anxiety. You can't always control the outcome, but you can always control your effort and your focus in this present moment. This is the game you can always win. And naturally, this game doesn't end when you walk off the court. The inner skills of non-judgmental awareness, trust, and relaxed concentration aren't just tennis skills, they're life skills. The self-one that tells you your backhand is terrible is the same self-one that tells you you're not smart enough at work or brave enough in your relationships. The frustration you feel missing a shot is the same frustration you feel stuck in traffic. The inner game teaches us that in every human endeavor, there are outer obstacles and inner obstacles. And while the outer goals may shift and change, the inner obstacles remain constant: fear, doubt, and distraction, all manufactured by the same interfering mind. By learning to quiet that mind and trust our deeper selves in something as simple as a game of tennis, we're developing a skill that can bring more grace, more joy, and more success to every single moment of our lives. When you first encounter the inner game of tennis, it feels like someone just handed you a key you didn't know you needed. The idea is so simple, so obvious once you hear it, that you wonder how you've made it this far without it. The concept of the two selves isn't just a clever metaphor. It's a perfect X-ray of the internal struggle that every single one of us lives with every day. What makes this book so transformative is that it doesn't pile more onto your plate. It doesn't hand you another checklist of 10 things to remember. It does exactly the opposite. It teaches you to subtract. It shows you how to get out of your own way. In a world constantly screaming at us to do more, try harder, and optimize everything, Gallwey's message is a quiet rebellion. He's telling us that our peak performance, our deepest learning, and our greatest joy don't come from adding more effort. They come from removing the interference that suffocates our natural ability. This is why the book has survived for nearly 50 years. Its lessons are timeless, because the human struggle is timeless. The battle with the inner critic, the anxiety of performance, the hunger to unlock our own potential, These aren't problems unique to the 1970s. They're perhaps the defining challenges of our modern world, a world drowning in pressure and distraction. We all have a self-one that's been overtrained by school, by social media, by a culture of relentless comparison and judgment. And we all have a self-two that's waiting patiently for us to just quiet down for a moment so it can do its beautiful work. So how can you start playing the inner game right now, today? Here are a few simple experiments to try. First, practice the art of non-judgmental observation. Pick one routine activity you do every day. Maybe washing dishes, brushing your teeth, or walking to work. For just a few minutes, try to do it with your complete attention, simply observing the sensations without any judgment. Don't evaluate whether you're doing it right or wrong or fast or slow. Just notice the warmth of water on your hands or the rhythm of your feet hitting the pavement. Experience what it feels like to turn down the volume on that constant stream of commentary from self-one. Second, try programming self-two with an image. Before you tackle a challenging task, whether it's writing a report or having a difficult conversation, take just 30 seconds. Close your eyes and visualize a successful outcome. Don't map out the steps you need to take. Just see the finished report, feeling satisfied with your work. Or imagine the conversation flowing smoothly and ending with mutual understanding. Create a vivid, positive image, and then trust yourself to move toward it. And finally, whenever you feel a wave of stress or anxiety washing over you, remember your anchor to the present moment, your breath. You don't need fancy breathing techniques. Just pause and bring your attention to the simple, natural sensation of your breath moving in and out. That simple act of focus can create an island of calm in the middle of any storm one conjures up. That was a summary of The Inner Game of Tennis by W. Timothy Gallwey. We've explored the core ideas today, but here's the truth. A summary is like looking at a photograph of a stunning landscape. The real magic happens when you go there yourself. It's in the quiet moments of reading, when a particular story or a simple phrase lands differently than you expected. This summary is designed to help you decide if this book deserves your time and attention. If anything we've explored today has struck a chord with you, I genuinely hope you'll grab a copy. Reading it isn't just learning. It's an experience that can fundamentally shift how you see yourself, your potential, and the nature of the games you play every day. You'll find a link to the book in the description below. Also, if you found this journey worthwhile, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. That way you won't miss our next deep dive into another transformative book from some of the world's greatest minds. Let's keep learning and keep growing together.